During a hearing, the billionaire's twin daughters interrupt the judge. "Our dad is lying, Your Honor." What they reveal next leaves everyone speechless. The imposing courthouse was busier than usual that crisp fall morning. Reporters jostled in the century-old marble hallways, their hushed voices echoing off the walls. Inside the courtroom, the air conditioning wasn't enough to dispel the tension lingering in the air. It was the kind of morning that would remain etched in the memory of everyone present. At the center of attention sat James Miller, the billionaire known for turning a small startup into a clean energy empire, adjusting his $10,000 navy blue tie. His fingers, usually steady when signing multi-million-dollar deals, trembled slightly. The man who graced the covers of business magazines as the Green Energy King now faced accusations that could destroy not just his reputation, but also his freedom. At the back of the room, almost unnoticed by most people, two identical small figures in sky blue dresses fidgeted in their chairs. Emily and Emma Miller, the 5-year-old twins, were the very picture of innocence with their blonde hair in matching braids. Sarah, the nanny who accompanied them, tried to keep them busy with coloring books while nervously watching the proceedings. "Mr. Miller," Judge Richardson's voice resonated throughout the room, "you state under oath that you were completely unaware of any misappropriation of funds from the renewable energy projects." James shifted in his seat, his face a studied mask of serenity. This wasn't his first battle in court, and he knew exactly how to behave. His lawyer, Marcus Thompson, offered a discreet smile. They had rehearsed this moment dozens of times. "Your Honor," James began, his deep, controlled voice filling the courtroom, "as CEO of Miller Green Energy, my commitment has always been to transparency and sustainability. I can affirm with absolute certainty that I never authorized or had any knowledge of any diversion of resources." In the gallery, Elizabeth Miller, James's ex-wife and the twins' mother, clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. Her green eyes, identical to the girls', were fixed on the back of her ex-husband's head, as though she could bore a hole through it. Judge Richardson adjusted his glasses, studying the documents before him. "And what about the altered financial reports from 2024, the ones that redirected funds away from community projects?" James kept his composure, but a drop of sweat slid down his temple. "Your Honor, those reports were prepared by the Finance Department. As shown in the documents presented by the defense, That was when it happened. In the back of the room, Emily and Emma exchanged glances, as though sharing a secret through that mirrored look only twins seem to possess. Sarah noticed, too late, the determined spark in the girl's eyes, the same look they had when they were about to do something bold. "Our dad is lying, Your Honor." The children's voices, perfectly synchronized, cut through the air like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. The entire courtroom froze. James Miller, the man who never lost his cool, knocked over his glass of water, the liquid spilling over the expensive documents in front of him. The silence that followed was deafening. Cell phone cameras immediately turned toward the two tiny figures who were now standing on their chairs. Their expressions a mix of innocence and determination only children can combine. In 30 years on the bench, Judge Richardson had never witnessed anything like it. His gaze shifted from the girls to James, who had lost all color in his face, and then to Elizabeth, who covered her mouth with her hands. "Sarah," James finally managed to say, his voice shaking, "take the girls outside." But Emma, the more talkative twin, stepped forward. "Daddy said on the phone that the papers were fake." "We heard him." "It's true," Emily added, her small voice resolute. "He said no one would find out about the hidden money." The courtroom erupted in a flurry of whispers. Reporters scribbled feverishly in their notebooks, while James's lawyers rose in protest. Elizabeth remained still, silent tears streaming down her face. Judge Richardson struck his gavel 3 times, though the sound seemed distant, unreal. The truth, as so often happens, had come from the mouth of children who did not fully grasp the weight of their words, but who knew, with the crystalline clarity of innocence, the difference between truth and lies. James Miller, the billionaire, the business titan, the man who had built an empire, stared at his young daughters as if seeing them for the first time. In his eyes, a mixture of fear, shame, and, surprisingly, relief, like a hidden burden had just begun to lift. The courtroom was in an uproar, but for the twins it was as though only they and their father existed in that moment. In their small hearts, there was no understanding of the magnitude of what they had just done. They only knew that Daddy was saying something untrue, and Mommy had always told them that lying was wrong. Judge Richardson finally managed to restore order, but something fundamental had shifted in that room. James Miller's meticulously constructed facade had been shattered, not by seasoned investigators or shrewd prosecutors, but by two childish voices carrying the unintentional weight of truth. The hearing that would forever alter the Miller family's destiny was only beginning. Judge Richardson removed his glasses, methodically cleaning them with a silk handkerchief as he absorbed the extraordinary scene before him. 4 decades on the bench had never prepared him for something like this. The little twins, still standing on their chairs, kept their eyes fixed on him as if waiting for permission to continue. "Mr. Miller," the judge finally said, his voice calm but firm, "given these unusual circumstances, I'm going to allow your daughters to speak." Turning to Sarah, he added, "Could you please bring the girls up here?" The nanny hesitated, her gaze shifting between James and Elizabeth. It was Elizabeth who gave a subtle nod, and Sarah gently guided Emily and Emma down the main aisle of the courtroom. The soft echo of their little shoes punctuated the heavy silence in the room. James Miller appeared to have aged a decade in the last 5 minutes. "Your Honor, this is absurd. They're 5-year-olds. They barely know the difference between reality and make-believe." "Yes, we do," Emma protested, her high-pitched voice resolute. Emily squeezed her sister's hand in silent support. Judge Richardson leaned forward in his chair, softening his expression as he addressed the girls. "Emily and Emma, do you know where you are?" The twins nodded in unison. "We're in the judge's house," Emily answered timidly. "Mommy said that here people have to tell the truth." A wave of tenderness swept through the gallery. Elizabeth covered her face with her hands, tears now impossible to restrain. "And do you know why you're here today?" the judge continued. Emma took a small step forward. "Because Daddy said something that's not true. And lying is wrong." She paused, playing with the hem of her dress. "Mommy always says that even when the truth is hard, we have to say it." Prosecutor Michael Jenkins stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to ask the girls a few questions." At a nod from the judge, Jenkins approached, kneeling down to be at the twins' eye level. Emma, can you tell me what you heard your dad say?" The girls exchanged looks again, sharing that silent twin communication. This time, Emily spoke first. "It was on the night of Mr. Whiskers' party." "Mr. Whiskers," the judge repeated. "Their stuffed cat," Elizabeth explained softly. "It was his birthday 2 weeks ago. In any other circumstance, the room would have erupted in laughter. Yet there was something about the innocence of that detail that made it all the more poignant." Emma continued the story. "We couldn't sleep because we ate too much cake. Then we heard Daddy talking loudly in his office. He was angry," Emily added, her voice growing quieter. "He was talking about hidden money and poor people not getting their houses with sunlight." "Sunlight?" The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Solar panels," Elizabeth clarified, her voice trembling. "A project to bring electricity to underprivileged communities." James Miller shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face alternating between flushed red and pale. His lawyers whispered furiously among themselves. "What else did you hear?" Jenkins asked gently. "Daddy said no one would find out," Emma replied, "that the new papers would hide everything." Then he cried. Emily let go of her sister's hand and, to everyone's surprise, walked over to where her father was seated. "I'm sorry, Daddy, but we promised Mommy we would always tell the truth." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. James Miller looked at his young daughter, a visible battle raging inside him. For a moment, The mask of the powerful businessman completely fell away. "Your Honor," Marcus Thompson, James's lawyer, stood up abruptly. "This is clearly manipulation. These children have obviously been coached by their mother." "No, we weren't," Emma interrupted, offended. "We saw the secret safe too. Behind Grandma's picture." James's face lost what little color it had left. His lawyers exchanged alarmed glances. "Safe?" The prosecutor Jenkins leaned in, intrigued. "What safe is that, Emma?" "The one where Daddy keeps his important papers," she explained, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "We found it when we were playing treasure hunt. There are numbers that spin, just like in a spy movie." Emily, still beside her father, added, "And there are pictures too. Daddy with men in suits shaking hands. He always puts them in there after his secret meetings." Judge Richardson observed everything intently, his decades of experience telling him he was witnessing something extraordinary. The truth, in its purest form, was surfacing through the innocence of two children who had no understanding of the gravity of their words. "Mr. Miller," the judge finally said, "given these new developments, I believe we will need a warrant to examine your office." James Miller finally found his voice, but it came out hoarse, unrecognizable. "Your Honor, I can explain." "Daddy," Emily quietly cut in, her small hand resting on her father's arm, "you always say that strong men admit their mistakes. Like when you said you were sorry for missing my ballet recital. Those simple words, spoken with a child's unconditional love, seemed to strike James more deeply than all the formal accusations. His face twisted with an expression of profound anguish. Sarah finally approached to lead the girls back to their seats, but the damage, or perhaps the redemption, had already begun. The court was now processing what it had just witnessed, the truth revealed not through complex documents or elaborate testimonies, but by the clear eyes of two children who saw nothing but right and wrong. Elizabeth rose to welcome her daughters, wrapping them in a protective embrace. Tears on her face now blended pride with sadness, pride in her little one's bravery, sadness for the innocence they were inevitably beginning to lose that day. Elizabeth Miller stepped up to the witness stand with firm strides, though her heart pounded wildly. She adjusted the navy blue blazer she had chosen so carefully for this day, the same piece she'd worn when she first met James 15 years ago at a renewable energy conference. What an ironic twist of fate to be wearing it again now, on the day she could finally tell her own truth. "Ms. Miller," Prosecutor Jenkins began, "please state for the court your relationship to Miller Green Energy." Elizabeth moistened her lips, her eyes briefly meeting those of her daughters. Emma and Emily watched her with absolute admiration from the back of the room, now calmer in Sarah's arms. "I was the Director of Research and Development for 8 years, her voice rang clear through the courtroom. "Also, I was married to James Miller for 7 years. "And why did the marriage end?" James shifted uneasily in his seat. Elizabeth took a deep breath before replying. "I discovered serious irregularities in the very projects I was overseeing, projects that were supposed to change the lives of thousands of people." The prosecutor stepped closer, producing a document. "Miss Miller, can you identify this agreement?" Elizabeth held the paper with trembling hands. "Yes. It's the confidentiality agreement I was forced to sign 18 months ago." "Forced?" Judge Richardson leaned forward, interested. "Yes, Your Honor." Elizabeth straightened her shoulders. "When I confronted James about the irregularities, he gave me 2 options: sign the agreement or face a custody battle for the girls." A murmur of indignation rippled through the room. The twins, even without fully understanding, squeezed each other's hands. "Please elaborate on these irregularities," Jenkins requested. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment, as though reliving painful memories. It started with small discrepancies in financial reports, funds destined for community projects that seemed to vanish, equipment that never arrived where it was supposed to be installed. She paused, taking a sip of water. "At first, James said it was bureaucracy, normal delays. I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my husband, the father of my children, The man I met defending clean energy as passionately as I did. What changed? One night, working late in the lab, I found documents I wasn't supposed to see. Entire projects existed only on paper. Communities that supposedly received millions in green infrastructure never saw a single cent. James whispered frantically with his lawyers, his face a mask of tension. I confronted James that same night, Elizabeth continued, her voice wavering slightly. He was different, unrecognizable. He said I didn't understand the bigger game, that sometimes temporary sacrifices were needed for the greater good. And how did he react when you disagreed? He completely changed. The man I knew disappeared in that moment. Elizabeth wiped away a discreet tear. He threatened to use all his power and influence to take the girls from me if I didn't cooperate. He said no one would believe me over him. In the back row, Emily whispered something to Emma, who nodded sadly. Ms. Miller. The prosecutor presented another document. Do you recognize this signature? Yes, it's mine, on the confidentiality agreement. I signed it at 3 in the morning after hours of psychological pressure. James knew I would do anything not to lose my daughters. James's lawyer stood up. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is clearly emotional and overruled, the judge said sharply. Continue, Ms. Miller. Elizabeth composed herself in the witness chair. After I signed, I was immediately removed from all major projects. James announced that I had requested a personal leave to focus on the children. Within weeks, I was completely isolated from the company I helped build. And what about your findings? What happened to the evidence? James made sure everything was wiped out, or at least he thought he did. She allowed herself a small smile. But he forgot that I was the one who developed the company's backup system. James's lawyers began whispering anxiously among themselves. I kept hidden backups. I couldn't say anything because of the agreement, but I couldn't let it all disappear. I owed that to the people who would be depending on our projects. Mommy, Emma's voice came from the back of the room. Is that why you cried at night? The entire courtroom seemed to freeze. Elizabeth swallowed hard, tears now streaming freely down her face. Yes, sweetheart. Mommy cried because she couldn't do the right thing. Until today. Ms. Miller, the prosecutor asked gently, what made you decide to testify now? Elizabeth finally looked James directly in the eye. My daughters, they taught me today that truth is more important than fear. In their innocence, they did what I should have done a long time ago. Judge Richardson watched the scene intently. Miss Miller, are you aware that your testimony, given the agreement you signed, could have legal consequences? Yes, Your Honor. But after my 5-year-old daughters showed more courage than all of us adults, how could I remain silent? James Miller finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Beth, the girls, you can't... No, James, Elizabeth interrupted him firmly. They're no longer the little girls you can use against me. They've already shown who they are. Now it's my turn. Turning back to the prosecutor, she continued. I have all the evidence saved. Every document, every suspicious transaction, every phony project. I was just waiting for the right moment to bring it all to light. And why is now the right moment? Elizabeth smiled through her tears, looking at her daughters. Because today, my little ones taught me there's never a right moment to do what's right. The moment is always now. The prosecutor nodded, satisfied. No further questions, Your Honor. When Elizabeth left the witness stand, her legs trembled, but her back was straight. Years of forced silence were finally ending. As she passed by James, their eyes met briefly. Where there was once love, now there was a complex mix of hurt, pity, and, surprisingly, a hint of gratitude. Gratitude for the 2 little warriors they had raised together. Emily and Emma ran to hug her as soon as she reached the back of the room. In the midst of that tight embrace, between tears and smiles, Elizabeth finally felt truly free. The price of silence had been far too high, but the sound of truth, even from the tiniest voices, had proven stronger than all the threats in the world. Rachel Anderson straightened her grey suit and walked to the stand with the rigid posture of someone carrying an invisible weight. As the former Vice President of Finance for Miller Green Energy, she knew her testimony could not only destroy James Miller, but also shake the entire clean energy sector. Ms. Anderson, Prosecutor Jenkins began, what exactly was your position in Mr. Miller's company? I was Vice President of the Finance Department for 6 years, Rachel replied, her voice betraying a slight tremor. I worked directly with James Miller until my dismissal 8 months ago. And why were you dismissed? Rachel cast a hard look in James's direction. Officially, for corporate restructuring. In reality, because I started asking inconvenient questions about certain financial transactions. The prosecutor presented a red folder to the court. Mrs. Anderson, do you recognize these documents? Yes, she answered, adjusting her glasses. They're copies of financial reports I managed to save before I was fired. They show serious discrepancies between the amounts declared for community projects and the amounts actually invested. In the back of the room, Emma nudged Emily and whispered something in her ear. Sarah tried to hush them gently, but Judge Richardson noticed the movement. The girls seemed to have something to say, the judge observed. Considering their previous insights, perhaps we should hear them. Emma stood up excited. The red folder, Daddy has a bunch of them in the secret safe. The entire courtroom turned to look at the twins. James Miller visibly paled. What secret safe is this, my sweetheart? The prosecutor asked, walking toward the girls. Behind Grandma's picture, Emily explained, now also standing. We found it playing treasure hunt. Your Honor, James's attorney protested, this is ridiculous. We can't base an investigation on children's stories. Actually, Rachel Anderson interrupted, leaning forward, that would explain a lot. I always suspected James kept a parallel file, but I could never prove it. The prosecutor turned his attention back to the twins. Can you tell me more about this safe? Emma smiled, thrilled to have everyone's attention. It has numbers that spin, just like in a spy movie. We don't know the code, Hugh, but it's fun to turn the dial. And what did you see inside? Asked the judge gently. Only when Daddy left it open, Emily explained. There are a bunch of colored folders, red, blue, black, and photos, Emma added. Pictures of Daddy shaking hands with men in suits who give him money. Rachel Anderson straightened abruptly. Your Honor, this could be evidence of bribery. The suspicious payments I could never trace. James Miller finally exploded. Enough! They're just kids making up stories. Sarah, take them out immediately. We're not making it up, Emma protested, her small hands clenched into fists. We saw the safe on Mr. Whiskers' tea day. Judge Richardson raised an eyebrow. Tea day? Our doll tea party, Emily explained shyly. We have it every Thursday with our stuffed animals. Last week, Daddy forgot the safe open when he ran out because of a phone call. Rachel Anderson quickly checked her tablet. Last Thursday, as that's the day the company's stock plummeted after rumors about an internal investigation were leaked. Mr. Miller seemed very nervous that day, Sarah, the nanny, added hesitantly. He stayed locked in his office for hours, making calls. Prosecutor Jenkins seized the moment. Miss Anderson, going back to the documents you saved, can you show us where the discrepancies specifically appear? Rachel took the red folder in steady hands. Here, Rural Electrification Project. 50 million declared, only 5 million actually invested. Solar panel installations at public schools, 30 million declared and 3 million executed. The pattern repeats in all the social projects. And where did the rest of the money go? Offshore accounts, Rachel answered, her voice now firm. I found transfers to at least 5 different tax havens. When I questioned James, he said they were contingency funds to maximize social impact. The twins, still immersed in their own perspective of the situation, continued sharing details. There's a black folder Daddy looks at when he's sad, Emily chimed in. It has pictures of Mommy. Elizabeth, who had been watching silently, held her breath. And there are big numbers in red, Emma added. We tried to count the zeros, but there were too many. Rachel Anderson flipped through her documents quickly. Your Honor, I believe the girls are referring to the records of suspicious payments. The red markings match those on international transfer documents. Judge Richardson removed his glasses, massaging his temples. Ms. Anderson, based on your professional experience, what is the total scale of this scheme? Just from the documents I managed to save, hundreds of millions, considering what the girls describe in the safe. Potentially billions. James Miller slumped in his chair, watching his empire crumble before his eyes, not because of meticulous investigations by executives or auditors, but because of his own daughter's innocent observations during their secret playtimes. Daddy also has a blue folder with Emily's name on it, Emma suddenly said. He cried looking at it the other day. The courtroom fell silent. James raised his gaze to meet his daughter's curious eyes. It's your medical report, he admitted softly, his first direct confession. About your heart condition. Elizabeth covered her mouth with her hands, tears in her eyes. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Miller, Judge Richardson said calmly, I think we need a recess and a warrant to examine your office. Officers. That won't be necessary, James interrupted, his voice filled with defeat. The combination to the safe, it's 0419, the girl's birthday. Rachel Anderson eyed her former boss with a mix of pity and satisfaction. All those social projects, all those promises of clean energy to underprivileged communities, was it all a lie? James looked at his daughters, then at Elizabeth, and finally at his own hands. Not at first. At first, it was real. But then it got too complicated to turn back. The bad men started visiting the office, Emma interjected innocently, causing a fresh stir in the courtroom. Prosecutor Jenkins signaled to the officers, we need to examine that safe immediately. And Mr. Millis, I suggest you start thinking about a plea deal. As the officers prepared to leave, Emily approached her father, her small hands nervously grasping the hem of her dress. Daddy, she said softly, Mr. Whiskers said sometimes people do bad things when they're scared. Were you scared? James Miller, the powerful CEO who controlled billions, who built an empire on lies, broke down at his daughter's innocent question. A single tear rolled down his face as he silently nodded. The courtroom watched the scene in respectful silence, witnessing the moment when truth, through the pure eyes of childhood, finally broke down the last walls of an empire built on secrets. Special Agent Robert Carter stood before the courtroom, his impeccable dark suit contrasting with the tired look of someone who had spent sleepless nights poring over documents. The last 48 hours since discovering the secret safe in James Miller's office had revealed far more than anyone had anticipated. Your Honor, Carter began, his deep voice echoing through the room, what we've found goes far beyond mere corporate embezzlement. We are looking at one of the largest money laundering operations ever uncovered in the energy sector. The agent motioned to his team, who began distributing folders to the judge and the attorneys. In the gallery, Elizabeth squeezed her daughter's hands. Emily and Emma watched in fascination as the courtroom buzzed with activity. The documents found in Mr. Miller's safe revealed an intricate network involving a dozen high-ranking executives, 3 international banks, and a series of shell companies in various tax havens. Prosecutor Jenkins approached. Agent Carter, can you give us a sense of the scale of this scheme? So far, we have identified embezzlement totaling more than $2.7 billion. The money intended for clean energy projects in underprivileged communities was funneled through a complex web of international transactions. James Miller, now without his usual imposing demeanor, kept his eyes fixed on the table before him. Look, Daddy, Emma whispered too loudly, pointing to one of the screens where the agent was projecting diagrams. It looks like our string web. The entire courtroom froze. Judge Richardson leaned forward, intrigued. String web? Emily shrugged. We used to make webs with string in Daddy's office when he wasn't around. Kinda like the picture the man is showing. Except ours had colors. Agent Carter exchanged glances with the prosecutor. Miss Emma, Emily, did you play in your dad's office a lot? We weren't allowed, Emma replied, swinging her legs on the chair that was too big for her. Sarah always said it was off limits, but we snuck in at night when everyone was asleep. The judge motioned for Sarah to come forward. The nanny, visibly nervous, smoothed her uniform before stepping closer. Ms. Sarah Thompson, the prosecutor began, could you tell us about these rules regarding the office? Sarah intertwined her fingers, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Miller was very specific about it. The girls were absolutely forbidden from entering the office. I was supposed to keep them downstairs, away from any meetings or business calls. Did these instructions change at any point? They became stricter in recent months, Sarah continued, especially after Mrs. Elizabeth left the house. Mr. Miller installed a new lock, surveillance cameras, but the girl, she hesitated, a small smile appearing on her lips. They were very resourceful. Meaning? Emily and Emma turned everything into an adventure. For them, the band just made the office more interesting. They called it the Dragon's Castle and planned secret missions to sneak in. In the gallery, the twins exchanged mischievous smiles. Agent Carter glanced at his notes. Ms. Thompson, did you notice anything unusual about Mr. Miller's meetings? Yes, Sarah answered, gaining confidence. He had frequent meetings, always late at night, with men who never identified themselves, arriving in cars with tinted windows. Mr. Miller became more and more agitated after those visits. The bad men, Emma interrupted. They made Daddy cry. The courtroom fell silent. James Miller finally raised his eyes to meet his daughter's gazes. Ms. Thompson, the prosecutor continued, how did the girls manage to get into the office despite the security measures? Sarah blushed slightly. They discovered a route through the ventilation duct. Too small for adults, but perfect for them. I should have told Mr. Miller, but she looked at the twins with affection. They seemed so happy in their adventures, and they never broke anything. They just pretended to be explorers. Agent Carter held up a document. Your Honor, this clarifies something peculiar we found. Several important documents related to the scheme had children's drawings on the back. We used the blank sides to draw on, Emily explained proudly. Daddy always had a bunch of them. Papers which, the agent continued, we now know to be records of international transfers, contracts with shell companies, and bribery receipts. The prosecutor turned to Sarah. At any point did Mr. Miller discover these nocturnal adventures of theirs? I'm not sure, Sarah replied, but there was one night, about 2 weeks ago, when he found a drawing the girls had left on his desk. It was a family portrait from before the separation. She paused, emotional. He cried looking at that picture. It was the first time I saw him show any emotion in months. James Miller covered his face with his hands, his shoulders trembling slightly. Agent Carter resumed his presentation, detailing the complex criminal network. On the screen, arrows and connections multiplied, illustrating the flow of diverted money across different countries and companies. Each color represents a different type of operation, the agent explained. Red for direct misappropriation, blue for money laundering, green for bribes. Just like our web, Emma exclaimed again. We used colored string too. Red was for cars, blue for planes, green for boats. The agent paused, a sudden idea forming. Your Honor, the girls may have inadvertently mapped the scheme in their playtime. The patterns they created were based on what they saw in their dad's documents, the prosecutor finished. Without even realizing it, they recreated the money flow in their innocent make-believe games. Judge Richardson removed his glasses, massaging his temples. Ms. Thompson, any other relevant observations about Mr. Miller's behavior? Only that he changed drastically in the last few months. He seemed scared. Sometimes I heard him arguing on the phone late at night, begging for more time, mentioning the girls. They threatened us. Emily suddenly spoke up, her small voice clear. The bad men said they would hurt us if Daddy didn't do what they wanted. The entire courtroom froze. Elizabeth hugged her daughters protectively, while James Miller finally broke his silence. "I had no choice," he said, his voice raw. "They found out about Emily's heart condition. They said they could make her treatment disappear from the waiting lists. They said they could make the girls disappear too." Agent Carter signaled, and 2 officers approached James. "Mr. Miller, we need names. All of them." James looked at his daughters one last time, then at Sarah, who had silently safeguarded the little explorer's innocence all this time. "I'll tell you everything. Every name, every transaction, every threat. My daughters deserve to grow up in a better world than the one I helped create." As the officers escorted James to a private room for his formal statement, Emma and Emily gazed at the network of connections on the screen, still seeing it only as a reflection of their nighttime games. To them, those colorful lines had never represented crimes or betrayals, just the adventures of 2 little explorers who, without knowing it, had helped dismantle an empire built on lies. Sarah watched them with a mix of pride and melancholy, realizing that her quiet complicity in the twins' nocturnal explorations had, ironically, helped expose one of the biggest corporate conspiracies of the decade. Sometimes, she reflected, the truth needs children's eyes to finally emerge. Elizabeth Miller returned to the stand, carrying a worn-out shoebox. The court, already weary after hours of revelations, watched with renewed curiosity as she pulled out small black notebooks, colorful sticky notes sticking out from between the pages. "Miss Miller," Prosecutor Jenkins began, "can you explain what these documents are?" "They're my journals," Elizabeth replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I started keeping them 2 years ago, when I first noticed the irregularities. James always said I was being paranoid, so I decided to document everything." She opened one of the notebooks, revealing precise handwriting. Each entry is dated, with exact times and the names of the people in these suspicious meetings. "Meetings?" Judge Richardson leaned in, interested. "Yes, Your Honor. James began having late-night meetings in his office. Men who never signed in at reception, who came after all employees had left." At the back of the room, Emma nudged Emily. "The men with the black car," she whispered audibly enough for all to hear. The prosecutor used that cue. "Emma, can you tell us about those men?" "They always came when the moon was big," Emma explained, using her childlike sense of time. "We watched them from our window. Big black cars, like in a spy movie." Elizabeth consulted her journal. The meetings mostly happened on nights with a full moon, when it was brightest. They entered through the back entrance of the property, away from the security cameras. "And what else did you observe about these meetings?" James changed completely on those days. He'd get agitated, check the security cameras obsessively. "Once," she swallowed hard, "I found him throwing up in the bathroom before one of those meetings." Emily raised her hand timidly. By now the judge was used to the twins revealing interjections and signaled her to speak. "Daddy cried on the phone," she said, her small voice resolute. "We heard him when we got up for water at night. He kept saying, 'Please, don't do that,' over and over." James Miller, seated with his lawyers, hunched over even more. Elizabeth flipped through a few more pages. "In March of this year, I documented an especially tense meeting. James was on the phone, begging for more time. He mentioned something about, 'She won't survive without the treatment.' Emily's heart," Emma said innocently. "Daddy said he needed money to make her better." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Elizabeth wiped away silent tears. "Ms. Miller," the prosecutor continued gently, "aside from these journals, what other evidence do you have?" Elizabeth took a small USB device from the box. "Recordings from the home security system. James didn't know, but I had access to the backup feed from the cameras. There's one in particular." She paused, looking at James for the first time. "The night you burned documents in the backyard. The girls watched everything from their window, James. They thought it was a campfire." "We thought we could roast marshmallows," Emma exclaimed, "but Daddy wouldn't let us." "That night," Elizabeth went on, her voice tight with emotion, You came back inside a different man, remember? The girls had drawn a family picture with everyone together again. You hung it in your office, but the next day, he tore it up, Emily finished sadly. We saw it when we snuck in to play hide and seek. The prosecutor presented yet another document. Miss Miller, this is a transcript you mentioned in your journal. Could you read it for the court? Elizabeth took the paper with trembling hands. James, I can't do this. They're just children. Unknown voice. Children need their father alive, Miller, and fathers need both hands to hug their daughters. Got the message. James, please, I'll do anything. Voice, then sign the papers. And keep your wife quiet. The court fell into shocked silence. James Miller finally spoke, his tone raw and broken. They knew everything about my girls, Emily's condition, their school, even the names of their stuffed animals. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, absolute control. Elizabeth closed the journal softly. Is that why you pushed me away? To protect me. To protect all of you, James replied, defeated. But in the end, they're the ones who saved us. Our little detectives. Emma and Emily, not fully grasping the gravity of the moment, continued playing with Mr. Whiskers, their inseparable stuffed cat. Your Honor, the prosecutor addressed the judge, I'm requesting immediate protection for the Miller family. We're clearly dealing with a much larger and more dangerous organization than we initially realized. Judge Richardson nodded solemnly. Granted. And Miss Miller, these journals are extraordinary. Why keep them secret for so long? Elizabeth looked at her daughters, then at James. Sometimes silence feels like the only option when you have something too precious to lose. But our daughters, she smiled tearfully, they taught us that the truth always finds a way. The twins, oblivious to the seriousness of the situation, had started drawing. On paper, they created a new version of the family portrait, this time with smiling police officers protecting them all from the bad men. The price of silence had been high, but the cost of truth, though painful, offered a path to freedom, and it had all begun with two small voices that refused to stay quiet when confronted with a lie. Prosecutor Jenkins remained silent for a few moments, staring at the new set of documents in his hands. In his 30-year career, he had rarely come across anything so disturbing. Next to him, social worker Mary Peterson adjusted her glasses, preparing to present her findings to the court. Your Honor, Jenkins began, we'd like to call Ms. Peterson to present her investigation on the direct impact of the misappropriated funds on the social projects. Elizabeth instinctively hugged the twins tighter. Something in the prosecutor's tone warned her that worse news was coming. Mary Peterson walked to the stand, carrying a thick folder bearing the logo of Social Services. As the social worker assigned to evaluate the community projects affected by these crimes, I've spent the last few weeks documenting the real impact of the diverted funds. And what did you find? Among the hardest hit projects, Mary consulted her notes, is the Hope Solar School, where the Miller twins volunteered with their mother. Emma stood up excitedly. Miss Dorothy's school, we help her with the garden. The little girl's smile faded as she noticed tears in the social worker's eyes. Miss Emma, Mary said gently, you and your sister know Miss Dorothy very well, don't you? Yes, Emily answered. She taught us how to plant tomatoes. And she was supposed to get new solar panels for the whole school. James Miller lowered his head, his hands shaking visibly. Ms. Peterson, the prosecutor continued, what was the amount designated for Hope School's project? $12 million, Mary replied, her professional tone barely hiding her outrage. Enough to install a complete solar energy system, making the school self-sufficient and providing excess power to the underprivileged neighborhood where it's located. And how much was actually invested? $200,000, just enough to put decorative panels on the facade, panels that don't work, creating the illusion that the project was carried out. Emma tugged on Elizabeth's sleeve. Mommy, why is Miss Dorothy always asking for money to buy a fan? Wasn't Daddy going to give the school solar power? The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. James Miller finally raised his eyes, meeting his daughter's accusing stares. The money diverted from Hope School, Mary went on, was traced to an account in the Cayman Islands. Records show part of it was used to pay for Emily's private heart treatment. Elizabeth stifled a gasp. Emily, not fully understanding, clung to her sister's hand. Mr. Miller, Judge Richardson intervened. Did you divert funds intended for underprivileged children to pay for your own daughter's treatment? Before James could respond, Emma stood. But Daddy said we had to help Miss Dorothy. We even made signs to raise money for the school. The girls organized a lemonade stand, Elizabeth explained, her voice choked with emotion. They sold lemonade and drawings to help the school. James even gave a speech that day. Mary Peterson flipped through more documents. We found evidence that Mr. Miller used these charity events as a front to legitimize the diverted funds. The more visibility the twins' social actions had, the easier it was to justify suspicious financial transactions. Miss Dorothy cried that day, Emily recalled innocently. She said it was from happiness because everyone would finally have electricity. James Miller finally broke his silence. I had no choice. Emily's treatment and the insurance refused to cover it. The specialist said she needed surgery within 6 months or... So you stole from other children, Elizabeth burst out. You used our daughters as a shield for your crimes. The money was going to be returned, James weakly protested. I had a plan. Once Emily was better, I'd pay everything back with interest. But then they found out, started blackmailing me. Mary Peterson presented more papers. Hope School wasn't an isolated case. We identified 17 similar projects in communities where the twins volunteered with their mother. The pattern is always the same. Big announcements, charity events with the children, minimal or non-existent implementation. Emma, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "Is that why Tommy from school is always sick? Because there's no air conditioner in his classroom?" The entire courtroom fell silent. Mary Peterson discreetly wiped a tear. "Yes, sweetheart," she answered softly. "The cooling system that should have been installed with the solar energy would have really helped Tommy and other kids with asthma." James Miller looked like he had aged 10 years in the last few minutes. I never meant... Emily, Daddy only wanted... But we promised to help them, Daddy," Emily interrupted, her small voice carrying more weight than all the formal charges. "We gave them our word." Judge Richardson took off his glasses, massaging his temples. "Ms. Peterson, what is your professional recommendation in this case?" "Aside from the obvious criminal implications," Mary replied, "I strongly recommend that all diverted funds be immediately returned to the affected projects. These communities can't wait any longer." Elizabeth hugged her daughters, who were now quietly crying, finally beginning to understand the weight of everything that was happening. "Daddy," Emma said between sobs, "can we give our piggy bank to Miss Dorothy? It has almost $100. That was the final straw. James Miller, the powerful executive who had manipulated billions, broke down in tears at the innocence and generosity of his daughters, the same qualities he had exploited for his schemes. "That won't be necessary, Emma," the judge gently reassured her. "Your father is going to help fix all of this, right, Mr. Miller?" James nodded, defeated yet transformed. "I'll sign a full confession, list every diversion, every account, and I'll return every cent. My daughters, they deserve to grow up in a better world than this one I helped create." As the officials prepared to take James's formal confession, Emma and Emily clung to each other, having lost not only the image they once had of their father, but also a bit of their precious innocence. Yet amid the pain of truth revealed, a small light of redemption flickered, born of the same pure love that, though twisted, had driven James Miller's every misdeed. Detective Michael Harrison took the stand, wearing the grave expression of someone bearing an invisible burden. 25 years investigating corporate crimes hadn't prepared him for what he'd discovered in the last 72 hours. On his desk lay a stack of files labeled highly confidential, waiting to reveal their dark secrets. Your Honor, Harrison began, his raspy voice echoing in the room. What we've uncovered goes well beyond corporate fraud or money laundering. Mr. Miller was just one piece in a much larger, far more dangerous game. Prosecutor Jenkins stepped forward, adjusting his tie. Detective Harrison, could you elaborate? In the last 72 hours, we've interrogated 17 people connected to the case. The pattern is always the same: threats, blackmail, and... He hesitated, glancing at the twins. Violence against anyone who tried to leave the scheme. At the back of the room, Emma poked Emily. "The bad men," she whispered, loud enough for all to hear. Judge Richardson made a kind gesture. "Emma, would you like to tell us about those men?" Emma squeezed her sister's hand before speaking. "They always came at night. Big black cars that hissed like snakes when they stopped." "Hissed like snakes," the detective repeated. "Modified silencers on armored cars," Elizabeth explained, her voice trembling. "The girls heard them from their bedroom window." Emily continued her sister's story. "They never smiled, and they made Daddy cry. We watched them secretly through the vent hole." Detective Harrison checked his notes. "Ms. Miller, did the girls ever mention these men to you?" "They drew pictures," Elizabeth replied, pulling some papers from her purse. "They started drawing monsters in suits. I thought it was just their imagination until..." "One night," Emma interrupted, "one of them saw us peeking. He smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was like a big, bad wolf smile." James Miller, silent until then, burst out, "Enough! I'll tell everything. Just get the girls out of here." "They shouldn't. They can't." "Daddy," Emily said softly, "the bad men can't hurt us anymore if we tell the truth, right?" The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. James Miller, the powerful businessman, collapsed into his chair, tears streaming freely. "It all started with Emily's treatment," he began, his voice broken. "The insurance denied coverage. The doctors said she needed surgery within 6 months or..." He swallowed hard. "I had the money in the social project funds. I thought it would just be a temporary loan." Detective Harrison projected a series of documents. "That's when they showed up. Yes, somehow they found out about the initial diversion. They offered help to clean the money, build a structure no one would ever discover. In return, they wanted to use my company for other operations." "What kind of operations?" "At first they were small, inflated contracts here, a rigged public bid there. But then..." James looked at his daughters. "Then came the threats. They said they knew the girls' schedules, their school, the places they played. They showed me photos of them at the park, at ballet class." Elizabeth choked back a scream, holding her daughters protectively. "We knew, Mommy," Emma said softly. "We saw the men taking pictures of us from the black car window." Detective Harrison presented more documents. "We've identified the group as part of an international organization that specializes in using clean energy companies to launder money. The scheme is brilliantly sinister. They use environmental causes as a front for criminal activities." "They showed me photos of Emily's surgery," James continued, his voice breaking further. "Said they could make her treatment disappear from the hospital lists, that accidents happen in operating rooms." The courtroom was submerged in horrified silence. "That's why Daddy cried on the phone," Emily commented innocently. "He kept saying, 'Please, don't hurt them,' over and over." Detective Harrison displayed a series of photographs. "Do you recognize these men, Mr. Miller?" James studied the images, his face shifting between fear and resolve. "Yes, the one on the left is Victor Blackwood, the leader of the operation. Next to him is Richard Sterling, in charge of finances. And that one," he shuddered, "that's Marcus Bishop, the man who personally threatened my daughters." "The wolf smile man," Emma exclaimed. "Your Honor," Detective Harrison addressed the judge, "based on the evidence and Mr. Miller's testimony, we request immediate protection for the entire family. We are dealing with an extremely dangerous organization. Judge Richardson nodded gravely. Granted. Detective, continue. Mr. Miller, Harrison turned back to James, I need you to tell us everything, every detail, every meeting, every threat. James looked at his daughters, then at Elizabeth. I will. Every diverted cent, every scheme, every name. Whatever happens to me, my daughters, they have to be safe. We're scared of the bad men, Daddy, Emma said, her voice small but firm. But we're more scared of seeing you sad. That's right, Emily added. Mr. Whiskers said sometimes we have to be brave even if we're scared. James Miller sobbed openly now, years of tension and fear finally escaping. I'm so sorry, my little ones. Daddy did everything wrong while trying to do what was right. Detective Harrison turned on a recorder. Mr. Miller, let's start from the beginning. Exactly when did Victor Blackwood first contact you? Over the following hours, James Miller unraveled a web of corruption spanning 3 continents. He detailed secret meetings, veiled threats, and the mounting terror of seeing his daughters used as leverage. Each revelation seemed to lift a weight from his shoulders, even as it deepened the seriousness of his legal predicament. The twins, tired but still attentive, occasionally chimed in with their innocent observations. The man who always chewed on toothpicks, the one who limped on his left leg, another with a scar near his eye, details that helped identify key members of the criminal organization. There's one more thing, James finally said, his voice raw after hours of testimony. They don't know I saved everything. Every document, every threat, every piece of proof. It's somewhere they'd never think to look. Where? The detective asked. James looked at his daughters with a bittersweet smile. In their dollhouse. In the secret attic I built to store Christmas presents. I figured it was the one place they'd never search. Emma and Emily exchanged surprised looks. Miss Daisy's room, they asked in unison, referring to their favorite doll. Yes, my little ones, James replied. Daddy turned the most innocent spot in the house into the most important safe in the world. Detective Harrison gestured for several officers. We need a team to retrieve that evidence immediately. And Mr. Miller, your cooperation will be noted. I don't care about that now, James said, looking at his daughters. I only want them safe. I need them to know that, despite all the lies, their daddy's love was always real. Elizabeth, who had watched everything in silence, finally spoke. They always knew that, James. That's why it hurt so much to see you lie. Because they knew that wasn't the father they recognized. Judge Richardson took off his glasses, his expression stern. Officer Thompson, arrange police escort for the Miller's residence immediately. Miss Miller, you and the girls will be taken to a secure location. As for you, Mr. Miller, I know, James interjected softly. I'll go into custody, but first, he looked at the judge pleadingly. May I hug my daughters one last time? The judge nodded. Emma and Emily ran into their father's arms, and for a moment, amid the chaos and revelations, they were simply a family, broken, hurt, but still bound by a love even the darkest threats had failed to destroy. Daddy's going to fix everything, James whispered to his daughters. This time the right way. The twins clung to him, their little hands gripping the lapels of his suit as though they could hold together, with the force of their love, everything that was crumbling around them. A hush fell over the courtroom as forensic accountant Robert Matthews opened his black briefcase. Elizabeth, who had so far maintained a resolute composure, felt her hands begin to tremble at the sight of the Light for All Project logo on the documents he was organizing. Ms. Miller, Matthews began, professional tone masking the compassion in his eyes. Do you recognize this project? Elizabeth took a deep breath, fingers unconsciously squeezing the small gold sun pendant she wore, a gift from her daughters when the project was approved. Yes, it's the Light for All project. It was my life for 3 years. From the back of the room, Emma whispered to Emily, It's the project from Mommy's sun necklace. Ms. Miller, Matthews continued, could you explain to the court the original goal of this project? Elizabeth straightened in her seat, and for a moment her face lit up with the old enthusiasm. It was a groundbreaking solar energy program for underprivileged communities. Not just solar panels, but a complete system of training. We wanted to teach communities how to maintain their own systems, create jobs, generate income. Miss Dorothy's school, Emma interjected excitedly. Mommy was going to teach everyone how to make energy from the sun. Elizabeth's smile faltered. Matthews cleared his throat gently before continuing. Ms. Miller, during our investigation, we found something disturbing about what became of this project. He slid a series of documents across the table. Elizabeth took them in her trembling hands, her expression growing pale as she read. No, she whispered. This can't be. James, you wouldn't. James Miller, from his seat, looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last few minutes. Beth, 30 million, Elizabeth cried out, her voice cracking. 30 million diverted just from the training center. Those people trusted us, James. They opened their homes, shared their stories. Mommy, Emily's small voice cut through the air. Why are you crying? Elizabeth wiped her tears angrily. Matthews continued. The Light for All project was used as the main vehicle for money laundering for 2 years. Its unblemished reputation and strong social component made it perfect for concealing dirty money, Elizabeth finished bitterly. All those community meetings, those people's dreams, it was all just a front. Not at first, James interjected weakly. At first it was real, Beth. Your project was perfect, revolutionary. But then you turned it into a money laundering machine, Matthews concluded clinically. Records indicate that only 10% of the declared budget actually reached the communities. From the back row, Emma nudged Sarah. What's money laundering? Is that why the school money disappeared? Before Sarah could answer, Emily began to cry quietly. I had another nightmare last night, she sobbed. The bad men were stealing the sun from Miss Dorothy. Elizabeth felt her heart break. In recent weeks, the twins had been having recurring nightmares. Now everything made sense. Even without fully understanding, they'd sensed the weight of the betrayal. Matthews displayed a series of photographs on a screen. These are the communities that should have received full solar energy systems. Next to them, the reality of what was actually installed. The images were devastating. Where there should have been modern training centers, there were just a few poorly set up solar panels. Schools that should have had complete systems still relied on makeshift generators. The school looked sad in those pictures, Emma noted innocently. Before, it was all colorful in Mommy's drawings. Elizabeth could no longer hold back her tears. Those people, they painted the walls, prepared welcome parties for our team. Mrs. Maria even gave me her coconut cake recipe. Ms. Miller, Matthews continued gently. We found something else in our investigation, something that specifically concerns your daughters. He introduced another set of documents. Elizabeth examined them, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. The girls' visits, the charity events they attended, were carefully orchestrated to lend legitimacy to the project, Matthews confirmed. Photos of the twins with community kids were used in fraudulent reports for investors. We just wanted to help, Emily said softly, now clinging to her sister. Did we do something wrong, Mummy? No, my love, Elizabeth replied, her voice breaking. You two were the only genuine part of all this. James finally found his voice. Beth, the girls were never part of the plan. I just let them be involved because they begged me, because they wanted to be like you, like me. Elizabeth let out a bitter laugh. The naive idealist who thought she was changing the world, while you used our work, our reputation, even our daughter's innocence for your schemes. Matthews coughed softly. Miss Miller, there's one more thing we need to address. About the girls' nightmares. Sarah, the nanny, intervened. They started about 2 months ago. At first it was just Emily, but soon Emma too. They told me about them, Elizabeth said quietly. Dreams about shadows stealing the sun, about bad men locking the light away in safes. They're manifestations of the subconscious. explained Dr. Patricia Warner, a child psychologist who had been called to court. The girls were absorbing far more than the adults realized. Their nightmares are symbolic representations of the truth they sensed, but couldn't fully understand. Emma raised her hand timidly. Last night I dreamed the sun was crying, just like Mommy is crying now. Is that because of the dirty money? The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath at the innocent yet profound question. Matthews presented his final conclusions. The Light for All project was turned into a sophisticated money laundering operation that moved over $150 million in 3 years. The communities affected. They're not figures in your spreadsheets, Elizabeth interrupted firmly. They're people. People who trusted us, who shared their dreams with us. And I betrayed them. Not you, Beth, James said softly. You never knew. You truly believed. That's the problem, James, Elizabeth erupted. I believed. Those people believed. Our daughters believed. And you turned our faith into nightmares, Emily finished sadly. Like the monsters that steal the sun. Judge Richardson took off his glasses, massaging his temples. Miss Miller, I understand how devastating this must be for you, but your integrity isn't under question here. All evidence points to you being unaware. That doesn't make it any easier, Your Honor, Elizabeth replied, her voice calm, yet burdened with pain. Those people looked into my eyes while I promised their lives would change. My daughters. She looked at the twins with tearful eyes. My daughters have nightmares because of promises I helped make, but never kept. Matthews began gathering up his documents. With your permission, Your Honor, I suggest a recess. Ms. Miller and the girls could use a moment. No, Elizabeth interrupted. We need to finish this, for all those people, for the dreams we stole from them, for the nightmares we gave them in return. The twins approached their mother, each holding one of her hands. Emma lifted the small sun pendant Elizabeth wore. We can make another sun, Mommy, she said softly. A real one this time. Elizabeth hugged her daughters, tears flowing freely. From the defendant's seat, James Miller watched with a mix of shame and regret, finally grasping the true scope of his betrayal, not just of investors or communities, but of the dreams and innocence of his own family. The golden sun around Elizabeth's neck glimmered softly under the courtroom lights, a bittersweet reminder of broken promises and dreams that perhaps one day could be rebuilt. Not on lies and schemes, but on the pure truth only children seem to truly understand. The afternoon in the courtroom was winding down when Assistant Prosecutor Susan Parker burst through the side door, carrying a laptop and a pile of freshly printed documents. Her usually composed face showed clear signs of agitation. Your Honor, she said, still catching her breath, 20 minutes ago we received a series of anonymous emails. The sender used advanced encryption, but the content, she paused dramatically. The content changes everything. Judge Richardson motioned for her to continue. On the defendant's bench, James Miller straightened up, an odd expression flashing across his face. These emails, Susan went on, connecting her laptop to the courtroom's projection system, show several attempts by Mr. Miller to blow the whistle on the larger scheme in the last 3 months. Attempts that were systematically shut down. The first message appeared on the screen. From redacted to Anti-Corruption Task Force, date 3 months ago. Subject, evidence of an international money laundering operation. I need to report a large-scale criminal operation. I have documentary evidence of... The message ended abruptly. Susan then projected the reply that came minutes later. A photo of the twins playing in the park, taken that same day, with a simple message, "Children are so fragile." Elizabeth stifled a scream, pulling the girls closer. Emma looked at the photo and whispered, "That was the day we had strawberry ice cream." Mr. Miller, Prosecutor Jenkins intervened. "You tried to report the scheme." James ran his hands over his tired face. 3 times, every time, they showed me they were watching my daughters, photos of them at school, at ballet, even sleeping in their bedrooms. "The shadow men," Emily exclaimed suddenly. "They followed us with cameras." "We pretended it was a spy game, but it wasn't a game, was it, Daddy?" Emma finished, her voice small yet laced with understanding beyond her years. Susan projected more emails, attempts at contacting various agencies, each followed by veiled threats. Photos of the girls in different situations, always with sinister messages attached. "Daddy would call at night crying," Emily recalled. "We heard him on the intercom in our room." "Intercom?" the judge repeated. "We had an old intercom Daddy didn't know still worked," Emma explained, as though it were obvious. "It was our secret with Sarah. We used it to tell bedtime stories, but sometimes we heard Daddy talking to himself in the office," Emily finished. "He apologized to us, even though we weren't there." Sarah, the nanny, cleared her throat nervously. "They would tell me about these calls. I should have reported it, but you were protecting them," Elizabeth said gently. "Like all of us should have been." Susan continued her presentation. "The most significant is this email sent exactly a week ago." The screen showed a long, detailed message with names, dates, and specific amounts tied to the corruption scheme. Attached were incriminating documents and audio recordings. "This report never reached the authorities," Susan explained. "It was intercepted and deleted minutes after it was sent. But someone," she offered a small smile, "someone very skilled managed to recover it and send it to us today." James frowned. "I never managed to send that email. They stopped me before." "Emma!" Emily suddenly shouted, jumping in her seat. "The unicorn flash drive!" The entire courtroom turned to the twins. Emma covered her mouth with her hands, as though she'd revealed a massive secret. "What flash drive?" Prosecutor Jenkins asked gently. The twins exchanged a look, having one of those silent conversations unique to twins. Finally, Emma spoke. "We have a special dollhouse," she began. "Miss Daisy's mansion. It's the biggest dollhouse in the world," Emily added enthusiastically. "Daddy built it for us last Christmas." James smiled sadly. "I spent 3 months on every tiny detail. It was my way of making up for always being away." "There's a secret room," Emma continued, "behind Miss Daisy's library. We found it by accident when Mr. Whiskers knocked over the miniature bookshelf." The prosecutor leaned in, intrigued. "And what did you find in that secret room?" "A bunch of Daddy's important papers," Emily replied. "We knew they were important because he was always looking for them in the office." "And there was a shiny flash drive with a unicorn on it," Emma added. "We thought it was pretty, so you took it?" the judge asked gently. "We didn't steal it," Emily protested. "We just borrowed it for Mr. Whiskers to use as a lucky charm." James had gone pale. "The flash drive with all the evidence. I searched for it for weeks. I thought they had stolen it, that I'd lost my last chance." "You didn't lose it," Emma smiled. "We kept it somewhere safer." "Safer?" the prosecutor repeated. "Inside Mr. Whiskers' tummy," the twins said in unison. Sarah hid a grin. "Their stuffed cat has a hidden zipper in the back where they stash their little treasures." "And it's not just the flash drive," Emily continued, excited to finally share her secret. "We have all the important papers, too." "Papers?" Susan pressed further. "We needed paper for drawing pictures for our dolls," Emma explained, as if it were obvious. "So we took some from Daddy's office, but then we saw they were different from normal paper." "Different how?" the prosecutor asked. "They had big numbers and red stamps," Emily replied. "And pictures of bad men giving Daddy money." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. James Miller buried his face in his hands, torn between relief and despair. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said quickly, "I request an immediate team be dispatched to recover this evidence." "No!" the twins shouted together. "Only we know the secret way." "Secret way?" the judge asked. "To get into Miss Daisy's room without the bad men seeing," Emma explained. "We made a map and everything." Sarah spoke up. "The girls created an elaborate, espionage system, I guess. They know exactly when and how to enter each room of the house without being seen. Indeed, Elizabeth said, a sad smile on her lips. They turned all this terror into a big detective adventure. Judge Richardson took off his glasses, studying the two small figures before him. Emily, you understand we need grown-ups to help retrieve those documents, right? The twins conferred silently, and Emma finally answered, "We can guide them like a treasure hunt." "But it has to be our way," Emily added seriously. "So the bad men won't find out?" James, who had watched silently, spoke at last. "My daughters, my little detectives, you didn't just save your dad. You saved hundreds of people you don't even know." "We just wanted to help, Daddy," Emma said softly. "You always looked so sad." "And we promised Mommy we'd always tell the truth," Emily concluded. Elizabeth hugged them, tears streaming freely. "You are the bravest people I know." Prosecutor Jenkins quickly organized a special team, including Sarah and Elizabeth, to accompany the twins in retrieving the evidence. The girls insisted on bringing Mr. Whiskers. "He's part of the investigation team," Emma declared solemnly. Before they left, Emily turned back to her father. "Daddy, the bad men won't make you cry anymore, right?" James Miller, the once powerful businessman who had built and lost an empire, who had fallen to corruption yet also tried to do the right thing, looked at his daughters with tear-filled eyes. "No, my love. Thanks to you, they won't make anyone cry anymore." As the twins left with their escort, their excited voices already planning the big rescue mission for the documents, the courtroom watched in respectful silence. Somehow, amid all the darkness of threats and corruption, two small lights had managed to keep not only the evidence safe, but also something even more precious: the hope that truth, even when guarded by hands so tiny, always finds its way into the light. Susan smiled, glancing at her laptop where the anonymous email still shone. "You know, Your Honor," she commented softly, "sometimes the greatest heroes come in the smallest packages." Judge Richardson put his glasses back on, a slight smile playing on his lips. "And sometimes, Mrs. Parker, we need the most innocent minds to unravel the darkest schemes." Late afternoon light filtered through the courthouse as a small entourage followed two 5-year-old girls and their stuffed cat, all of them carrying in their tiny hands not just crucial evidence but also the key to their father's redemption and justice for hundreds of people. Somewhere, Miss Daisy's dollhouse waited, a silent guardian of secrets that would finally see the light of day. The morning of the sentencing dawned with a different kind of clarity. The courtroom was packed as never before. Journalists, executives, and, most importantly, representatives of the affected communities filled every available seat. In the front row, Elizabeth held the twins' hands. For the first time since the trial began, they wore formal matching blue dresses for what Emma had called Daddy's important day. James Miller entered under guard, no longer the corporate titan in his Italian suits, but a changed man in a simple, neatly pressed outfit. Deep shadows under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent cooperating with the authorities. As he passed his daughters, he tried to smile, but the tears welling in his eyes betrayed his controlled composure. "All rise," the bailiff announced, as Judge Richardson entered the room. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. Emily clutched Mr. Whiskers tightly to her chest, while Emma held her sister's hand even tighter. "Before issuing my sentence," the judge began, adjusting his glasses, "I'd like Prosecutor Jenkins to summarize the events of the past few weeks. Please, Prosecutor." The prosecutor stood up, arranging an imposing stack of documents. "Your Honor, in the 3 weeks since Mr. Miller began his cooperation, we have witnessed the largest dismantling of a criminal organization in the energy sector to date." Jenkins projected a digital map showing red dots scattered across the country. Each dot represents an arrest made possible by the defendant's information. So far, 32 senior executives, including 3 CEOs, 12 CFOs, and various high-level public officials. The bad men in suits, Emma whispered loud enough to be heard. Exactly them, Miss Emma, the prosecutor answered with a kind smile. Continuing, Jenkins displayed complex financial charts. Mr. Miller not only confessed to all his crimes, but also voluntarily provided access to all his accounts, properties, and investments. The total value of the assets to be returned exceeds $2.1 billion. A murmur ran through the courtroom. In the gallery, Mrs. Maria, one of the community leaders affected by the scheme, folded her arms in silent gratitude. Additionally, Jenkins went on, the defendant has spent 72 continuous hours helping our team map out the entire criminal structure. His testimony was crucial for— He didn't sleep? Emily interrupted, concerned. Daddy gets sick when he doesn't sleep. The entire courtroom seemed to soften at the child's innocent worry. Even Judge Richardson allowed a small smile. Mr. Miller, the judge addressed James, before your final statement, I'd like to hear from some of the community representatives. Mrs. Maria stood first. At 68, she radiated the dignity of someone who had spent her life fighting for better living conditions. When the solar project was announced in our community, we held a party. For the first time, we thought we'd have reliable electricity in the community center. Kids could study at night. Young people could take vocational courses. Her voice trembled. I saved my earnings from selling homemade sweets at the church door for 15 years to buy computers once the power arrived. Now, Mrs. Maria, James interjected softly, turning to face her, your sweets. My daughters bought them every week when they visited the project with their mother. Those coconut candies, Emma exclaimed. We used to save our allowance to buy them. Mrs. Maria smiled through her tears. Yes, dear, you were my best customers. Will Mrs. Maria's money come back, Daddy? Emily asked, her voice bearing a wisdom beyond her years. Yes, my love, James replied, his voice heavy with emotion, with interest. Miss Dorothy, teacher at Hope School, was next to speak. Young and determined, she held a drawing made by her students. This was drawn the day they announced the solar project. 32 children imagining what it would be like to study without overheating, to have a library with air conditioning, to use computers. She turned the drawing so the courtroom could see a colorful school with large solar panels on the roof, surrounded by smiling children. In the corner, a dedication read, For Uncle James, thank you for bringing the sun to our school. James Miller covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking silently. Your Honor, Miss Dorothy continued, I'm not here to ask for punishment. I'm here for my students, who still believe the sun will shine on our school one day. After more equally moving statements, Judge Richardson turned to James. Mr. Miller, your final words. James rose slowly, his eyes roaming the courtroom before settling on his daughters. Emma, when you were born, I promised I'd move mountains to protect you. Somewhere along the line, I lost my way. I forgot that the greatest protection a father can give is setting the right example. The twins squeezed each other's hands, silent tears rolling down their small faces. Elizabeth, he continued, turning to his ex-wife, you had a pure, genuine dream. You wanted to change the world through clean energy, give hope to those who had none. I turned that dream into a nightmare. There aren't enough apologies for that. Facing the communities, he said, in the last few weeks, I've visited every affected project. I've met every stories up, every interrupted dream. I've seen children studying by candlelight, seniors barely keeping their meds cold in failing fridges. Refunding the money is just the start. Every day I spend in prison will be dedicated to figuring out how to rebuild what I destroyed. Judge Richardson took off his glasses, looking intently at the man before him. Mr. Miller, your case is unique in many ways. The scope of your crimes is shocking, but your cooperation and apparent transformation are equally remarkable. Consulting his notes, he continued, taking everything into account, your complete confession, your extensive cooperation leading to the dismantling of a larger criminal organization, the voluntary restitution of assets, and the unique circumstances that led to the discovery of these crimes. I hereby sentence you to 10 years in prison." A low murmur rippled through the room. James simply nodded, accepting it. "Additionally," the judge went on, "I'm establishing an independent commission to oversee the restitution of the funds." "Mrs. Miller," he addressed Elizabeth, "given your background with these communities and your proven integrity, I'd like you to chair this commission." Elizabeth wiped away a tear. "I'd be honored, Your Honor." "Regarding visitation," the judge said, looking at the twins, "I authorize bi-weekly supervised visits. These children, in their innocence, played a key role in bringing the truth to light. That bond should be preserved." Emily raised her hand timidly. "Your Honor, can Mr. Whiskers visit too?" He helped catch the bad guys. The whole courtroom seemed to melt at her question. Even the toughest bailiffs hid small smiles. "Yes, little one," the judge answered, surprisingly gently. "Mr. Whiskers is always welcome." Before being taken away, James made one last request. "Your Honor, I'd like my sentence to include community service at Hope School after my release. I want to personally rebuild what I destroyed." "Granted," the judge nodded. "And furthermore, I order that 30% of the recovered funds go immediately to the school projects, starting with Hope School." Miss Dorothy covered her mouth, tears of joy falling freely. Emma and Emily ran to their father before the guards reached him. James knelt, hugging his daughters one last time as a free man. "We'll wait for you, Daddy," Emma whispered. "Every sunny Sunday," Emily added. "And we'll help Miss Dorothy with the new school." Emma chimed in. "We'll tell you all about it at our visits," Emily promised. James held his daughters close, tears now streaming down his face. "My little detectives, you saved me. Not just from prison, but from myself." Elizabeth approached, placing a gentle hand on her ex-husband's shoulder. "They are the best part of both of us, James, and now they have a life lesson no book could teach." "That the truth always wins?" Emma asked. "That love is stronger than fear," Elizabeth corrected softly. The guards stepped forward respectfully. It was time. James stood, wiping his tears. "Your Honor," he said one last time, "thank you for the wisdom in your ruling, and to all the communities, I promise that every day of the next 10 years will be spent figuring out how to fix what I broke." "We'll help," Emma declared. "Yes," Emily agreed. "We already have a plan." "A plan?" the judge asked. Curiosity piqued. "We're going to do another lemonade stand," Emma explained with utmost seriousness. "But this time all the money goes to Miss Dorothy's school. And Mrs. Maria will make her coconut candies," Emily added. The entire courtroom, judge, prosecutors, officers, and spectators, seemed torn between tears and smiles. The innocence of the twins, their resolve to help even amid such a complicated situation, reminded everyone what truly mattered. As James was led away, Mrs. Maria approached Elizabeth and the girls. "Next week, I'll start making my coconut candies again," she said softly. "This time, the community center will have real electricity. Real sunlight." Miss Dorothy joined them, still clutching the drawing made by her students. The twins watched their father being led away, but their eyes showed no despair, only an early understanding that sometimes you must lose something to find something greater. James Miller had lost his freedom, yet in the process he had reclaimed his humanity. "Mommy," Emily said softly, pointing to the window of the courtroom, "look at the sun out there." Elizabeth wrapped her arms around her daughters, watching the golden rays shining through the stained glass. "It's a new beginning, my little ones. For all of us." And it was true. Not just for the Miller family, but for the hundreds of people who, thanks to the courage of two small twins and their stuffed cat, would finally see their dreams of clean energy come true. Justice had been served, not only through a sentence, but also through the genuine transformation of a man who, guided by the innocence of his daughters, found his way back to the light. Somewhere in the room, Mr. Whiskers rested quietly in Emily's arms, his mission as secret keeper finally complete. The truth had prevailed, bringing with it the promise of brighter days. Not only for the Miller family, but for everyone whose life had been touched by this extraordinary story of redemption. The courtroom looked different that morning. The hard benches that once held reporters and onlookers were now empty, except for a small group in the first row. Sunlight streamed through the tall stained glass windows, creating colorful patterns on the marble floor, a sight that fascinated Emma and Emily as they sat quietly in their matching blue dresses. Elizabeth nervously adjusted the folder on her lap, while Sarah, the nanny who had become an indispensable part of the family, tried to keep the twins busy with the ever-present Mr. Whiskers. Child Services representative Patricia Warner organized her final reports, occasionally casting encouraging looks toward the girls. "All rise," announced the bailiff as Judge Richardson entered. Over the past few weeks, the judge had witnessed some of the most extraordinary revelations of his career, and he appeared more relaxed today. His eyes softened when he saw the twins, now making Mr. Whiskers bow in a playful greeting. "We are here," he began, adjusting his glasses, "to finalize the custody of Emily and Emma Miller, as well as to establish visitation and communication parameters with their father, James Miller, who is currently in state custody." Elizabeth held her breath. Although the decision was practically certain, years of uncertainty and fear still weighed on her shoulders. "Dr. Warner," the judge addressed the social worker, "could you present your final conclusions?" Patricia stood, smiling gently at the girls before she began. "Your Honor, after an extensive evaluation of the family environment and the children's emotional well-being, my recommendation is unequivocal. Elizabeth Miller has demonstrated an exceptional ability to create a stable and nurturing environment, even under extremely challenging circumstances." She consulted her notes. "The twins show admirable emotional and social development, especially considering recent events. Their ability to process complex situations through healthy play and open communication is remarkable." "It's true," Emma interjected excitedly. "We do little plays with Mr. Whiskers to understand the hard stuff." The judge smiled. "And does that help?" "A lot," Emily replied. "When we feel sad about Daddy, Mr. Whiskers tells stories about when he was away from his own family but came back stronger." The entire courtroom seemed to melt at the innocence and wisdom of that response. Patricia continued her report, highlighting the importance of the routine Elizabeth had established and Sarah's fundamental support. "Furthermore," she added, "it's crucial to mention Mrs. Miller's role in the new foundation that will manage the recovered funds. Her commitment to turning a tragic situation into something that benefits entire communities is exactly the sort of example these children need." Judge Richardson removed his glasses, reviewing the notes in front of him. "And what about contact with their father? The girls consistently express a desire to maintain a relationship with James Miller," Patricia replied. "In our sessions, they've shown a surprising grasp of the situation with no signs of trauma or resentment." "We love Daddy," Emma declared simply. "Even when he does something wrong," Emily added. Elizabeth wiped away a discreet tear, while the judge gave the twins a gentle smile. "Very well," he began, his voice carrying the weight of the decision. "Considering all reports and evidence presented, this court grants full custody of Emily and Emma Miller to their mother, Elizabeth Miller." He paused before continuing. "Regarding visitation rights, I authorize bi-weekly supervised visits with their father, James Miller, along with free communication through letters, drawings, and monitored phone calls." The twins exchanged delighted smiles. Elizabeth exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Additionally," the judge went on, "considering the unique part these children played in bringing the truth to light, I'm ordering that special arrangements be made for their visits, a more comfortable room, extended time, and the possibility of doing activities together like reading and drawing." "Can Mr. Whiskers come too?" Emily asked timidly. "Of course," the judge smiled. "He's an important part of this family." Later that same day, a few hours after the hearing, Elizabeth was in her new office at the True Light Foundation. The walls, still undecorated, would soon be filled with the twins' drawings and photos of ongoing projects. Miss Dorothy, now Director of Educational Programs, was reviewing plans for the reconstruction of Hope School. "Construction can start next week," she explained excitedly. "The new solar panels are already on order, and the construction company is ready to begin." "What about Mrs. Maria's coconut candies?" Emma asked from her corner of the room, where she played with Emily. Elizabeth smiled. "She'll be providing snacks for the workers, and later, when the community center is finished, she'll have her own industrial kitchen. Powered by the sun," Emily chimed in enthusiastically. Sarah came into the room carrying an envelope. "James's first letter has arrived." The twins hurried over to their mother, who carefully opened the envelope. Inside, along with the letter, were a few drawings. James's attempts at sketching Mr. Whiskers and scenes of the family life he remembered fondly. "Dear Emily and Emma," Elizabeth began to read. "It's hard to start this letter. How can I explain to two little girls who are at once so small and so big what goes on in the heart of a father who made so many mistakes? But you've always taught me that the truth, even when it hurts, is the best path. So here it is. My new home is different. No toys are scattered on the floor. No laughter echoes in the halls. But something makes me smile every day. The memories of you and the hope of our future visits. I've met other dads here. We formed a reading group, and we're learning how to write children's stories. Maybe I'll create one about two very special little detectives and their super brave stuffed cat. Sorry for the messy drawings. I promise I'll get better with practice." The director let me put up photos on the wall. I chose the one from the day of your lemonade stand, remember? When you sold lemonade to help Miss Dorothy's school. I look at it every morning and remember that even in the darkest times, there's light. I heard your mum's foundation has begun its work. I've jotted down a few ideas, things I've learned from my mistakes. Ways to make these projects work better. If you think Mum would like it, I can send them in my next letters. Most importantly, never ever feel guilty about what happened. You didn't break our family, you saved it. You showed us that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what truly matters. All my love, Dad. The twins listened intently, their eyes shining with unshed tears. Emma was the first to grab some colored pencils. "Let's write back right now." Elizabeth nodded, giving them paper. While the girls drew and dictated their response, Mr. Whiskers keeping close watch from the desk, she returned to the foundation's plans. The first project would naturally be Hope School, but there was much more to come. Community centers powered by solar energy, technical training programs, microloans for small entrepreneurs like Mrs. Maria. The recovered funds would be transformed into genuine change. "Mommy?" Emily called, showing her drawing. "I made our new family." On the paper, colorful figures depicted Elizabeth and the twins in front of the foundation, James in his new house, surrounded by books and pictures, Hope School gleaming with solar panels, and Mr. Whiskers sporting a dashing bow tie. "And I made a giant sun," Emma displayed her drawing, "to remind us that even when it's dark, there's light somewhere." Miss Dorothy, who had been watching, discreetly wiped away a tear. "You know you'll get to help decorate the new school, right?" The twins' eyes lit up. "Can we make a Mr. Whiskers mural? And one of Mrs. Maria making coconut candy? And one of Daddy writing stories?" Elizabeth hugged her daughters, amazed by their ability to find joy and hope even under the hardest circumstances. The afternoon light was fading outside, and there was still much work to be done, but in that moment, everything felt possible. Later, after putting the girls to bed with Mr. Whiskers in his place of honor between them, Elizabeth sat down in her home office. On the wall hung a new frame, the first drawing the twins had made for the foundation, depicting their family, changed, transformed, but still bound by love and now by truth. Sarah entered quietly with a cup of tea. They fell asleep so fast tonight. "It's been an emotional day. For all of us," Elizabeth smiled, taking the cup. "But you know, Sarah, for the first time in a long while, I'm not afraid of tomorrow. Why would you be? Sarah sat down. You've got the best guides anyone could ask for. Two little ones who turned a story of lies into something so much bigger than anyone could have imagined. The phone rang. It was from the prison. James, DEI's, in his permitted nightly call, wanted to know how the girls had responded to his letter. They're already planning how to decorate the new school, Elizabeth said. They want to make murals telling our story, all of it, James, the sad parts and the happy parts. Because you can't have a rainbow without a little rain, they heard Emma say sleepily at the door, with Emily right behind her. Shouldn't you be in bed? Elizabeth asked gently. Mr. Whiskers heard the phone, Emily explained, as though it were obvious. He wanted to say goodnight to Daddy too. On the other end of the line, James wept silently as he listened to his daughter's drowsy voices sending kisses and promises of visits filled with drawings and stories. After the girls finally returned to bed, for good this time, Elizabeth ended the call with a renewed sense of certainty. Though her family had been broken and pieced back together like a piece of kintsugi pottery, the golden seams only made it stronger and more beautiful. The sun had fully set by then, but its glow seemed to linger on the sleeping twins' smiles as they cuddled Mr. Whiskers, on the foundation's plans spread out across the desk, on James's letter carefully tucked away in a special folder, on Mrs. Maria's dreams of solar-powered candies, on the hopeful light in Miss Dorothy's eyes as she imagined her renewed school. The truth had come at a high cost, but it had brought something priceless, a new dawn. Not just for the Millers, but for everyone touched by their story of redemption, transformation, and unconditional love. And at the center of it all were two small voices that proved the greatest power sometimes isn't found in financial empires or elaborate schemes, but in the simple courage to speak the truth, even if that voice is small. "Mommy," Emma called one last time from the doorway, Emily and Mr. Whiskers sleepy in her arms. "Yes, my love. We did the right thing, didn't we?" Elizabeth stood to take her little heroines back to bed. "Yes, my brave ones, you did the truest thing in the world." And it was true. Somewhere, James was rereading his daughter's letter, likely already planning his response. In dozens of communities, people slept, dreaming of the changes to come. And in one small bed, two twins held their stuffed cat Esau, knowing that sometimes the happiest ending isn't the one we expect, but the one we create with truth, courage, and love.